Hey there, welcome back to another Slightly Rednecked video. It's another quail update video today, and I'm going to do it a little differently than I have been in the past. Today I'm going to start off by answering a few viewer questions. I responded to most of them in the comments, but I figured I'd share them on the video here just to make sure that if anybody else has that question, we can get those answered for them as well. And then once I get that wrapped up, we'll take a look at the quail, what the grow outs are doing right now, and how the quail in the outdoor hutch are doing. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so for the first question comes from a viewer by the name of Allie May, and Allie's been a long-time watcher, or at least a recent watcher. I've seen several comments from her, had several interactions with her. Thought I'd share her question on air because it's one I get asked quite frequently. So what she asks is, at what age do you typically butcher? I have some 5-week-olds that I'm nervous about. I'm just not sure how long to let them grow. Now, Allie, that's a great question, and I can tell you I typically butcher between 6 to 8 weeks. I have butchered as young as 5 weeks. Honestly, with my roosters especially, it's just whenever they get so noisy I can't stand it anymore, and that's usually about 6 weeks old. If I'm going to butcher hens, a lot of times I'm keeping them to replace breeders. But if I am going to butcher them, I usually wait till about 8 weeks. Once they start to lay eggs, get real close to laying eggs, then the grow out rate from that point on really slows down. So the food ratio, it's just not worth spending any more money on food because they're not going to grow that much faster at that point. So hopefully that answers your question. Somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks is my typical butcher. All right, the next question comes from a viewer by the name of Brandon Lee. And Brandon was watching my How to Improve Your Hatch Rate video where I talked about using a Listerine mixture to spray the eggs and to keep bacteria down. And he responded with, could I use rubbing alcohol? You know, Brandon, I got to give you credit for your ingenuity there. Use what you got on hand, and I say try it out and see if it works. But honestly, I've never tried it. I don't really know, and I personally think it may be better to stay away from that because rubbing alcohol is fairly harsh, and you don't want to put anything on the eggs that's going to wash away the protective barrier on the eggs. So I don't know that it will do that. It's, like I said, it's just guesswork, and honestly, Listerine's cheap, easy to come by, so that's what I stick with and that's what I use. But if you do use it and it works, let me know. I'd love to hear from you on that. The next question comes from a viewer by the name of Clever Kim's Curious. A little bit of a tongue twister to say the username there. But she's asking me, can you talk about how heat might affect them and how we might keep them cool? It's getting over 100 lately where I live, Pueblo, Colorado, and I'm wondering if it's going to affect laying or anything. I miss them, give them frozen mixed vegetables in pans of water, and give them watermelon rinds from the fridge. I have no idea if this is useful or anything, but it makes me feel better anyway. Well, I would start off by saying, I think those are great things to do for your birds. It's a little too humid here, so I don't mist them because that's not going to do much for them here, but where you live, if it's a little drier, that's probably going to help out a lot. Frozen vegetables, all those things, none of that stuff's going to hurt your birds. I don't do much of anything. I keep them shaded, I make sure they're well ventilated, and they always have fresh, cool water to drink. And that's really about all I do, and my birds do just fine. I will tell you from everything that I've checked into, from my personal experience and everything that I've read, heat has a little bit of an effect on the birds, but not in the same way that you might consider. So it's not like the birds stop laying because they get too hot. They stop laying because of stress factors, and heat can be one of those stress factors, but it seems to be a little bit more of sudden temperature changes causing stress on the birds, and that's what causes them to maybe stop laying temporarily. So I hope that makes sense, but what I'm saying there is it's not the heat directly. It's not 100 degrees that affects them, so you can't say, once it gets to 100 degrees, the birds are going to stop laying eggs, but more like if it was a sudden change in temperature. So let's say you moved them from maybe an air-conditioned building where it was 70 degrees, you move them outside, and it's suddenly 100 degrees. That drastic change in temperature can definitely affect your birds, stress them out a little bit, and that might cause them to go into a temporary temporarily stop laying eggs. Hopefully that helps you out a little bit and puts your mind at ease a little bit. Let me know what your experience is if you see something different from them. Okay, the next question kind of comes from two different viewers, really. I had one comment on my YouTube channel. Michael Broussard commented on my YouTube channel, asked some questions about when they should start laying eggs after a move. Said that he had a couple of weeks, was told that it would be a couple of weeks, and he had some males in there that were starting to peck on each other, but he didn't want to remove them because he wanted fertile eggs. And then I had a fairly lengthy conversation through my Facebook channel with a young man by the name of Tyler Patterson, and he had a very similar problem. He has some 8 weeks old, I believe they are, birds, and he's having a problem because the roosters are fighting with each other. And he's got a setup where he's mixed them up quite a bit, quite a few different ways. And he's just having real problems with the roosters fighting with each other. So wanted to know what he could do with that. So kind of answer that question. Couple of things. It's very common especially when you mix birds that have never been together, there's going to be some fighting. There's going to be some, they've got to establish a pecking order and a dominance order. So that's going to happen. Especially roosters, when they're right about mating age and you just introduce them to a bunch of hens, they're going to pick on each other a little bit to establish who's the dominant rooster in the group. Couple of things you might be able to do there. First things first, that may indicate overcrowding. So make sure that you've got enough cage space for them. They need at least 1 square foot per bird. So I think you said you had 12 birds in the cage and you had a 3x5 cage. So that sounds like a big enough cage. 15 square feet for 11, 12 birds should be plenty of room for them. You might add some hiding spaces in there. So like take a cardboard box, just a small one that they can fit under, and cut out holes in the front and the back so they can get in one side and get out the other, don't get trapped in there. That gives them a place to kind of get away from the other birds, gets them out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. That might help a little bit with that as well. If that doesn't work, you may end up having to either cull the rooster that's aggressive or move them into separate cages so that you have maybe 4 females and 1 male in each cage, and that should keep your fertility levels up, and it'll separate the roosters so you don't have to worry about them fighting anymore. So couple of thoughts right there. Unfortunately, I can't, I don't have the magic bullet here to solve your issue, but those are a couple ideas that should help you out with that. So hopefully that does. All right, I think that kind of wraps up the question and answer section of this video. So let's do just a quick view here. Let's see how the grow outs are growing, and we'll talk about what's going on with the existing quail here real quick, and then we'll wrap this video up. Now, let's take a quick look at the grow outs here in the garage. You can see they're a little warm today. It's afternoon, but they're doing pretty good here. I've got half of them in this cage and half of them in that cage. There's about 6 females in each cage and 2 males in each cage. I've kind of upped my male to female ratio a little bit, hoping that might give me a little bit more hen to rooster ratio in my hatch rates, and if that works out, I'll kind of explain why. And future video, we'll see how that works though. Not much to say about these guys. They're about full grown. I've got, the only thing I did to save my roosters, I just weighed them all and I saved the 4 biggest roosters and I threw them in the cages. That's about it. They're a little bit overcrowded in these pens right here, but these are just temporary pens. I'm trying not to split them up too much because, as I just got done talking about in the question and answer section, if I do that and then move them together in the outside pen I'm building, then I may end up with some fighting, and I'm trying to reduce that. So I'm kind of keeping them together. They're getting along just fine. No fighting because they kind of grew up together, and no issues so far. So I can keep them there for another week or two until I get that thing done, and then move them out there. All right, so let's take a look at the quail in the outdoor hutch here and see how they're doing. And I don't know if you can see through that screen wire there or not in the camera, but hopefully you can. They're doing pretty well, really. No major issues out here. The bucket watering system I set up here is working out fantastic. Just make sure that they keep watered all the time. I've gotten a lot of comments about adding sandboxes, so I did add just a standard 10-20 tray, and I just put some potting soil in it right now. And they seem to enjoy getting in there every once in a while, but they don't really hang out in there very often. I've got 1 or 2 that'll get in there, but for the most part, not much. Now, what they do is they tend to lay their eggs in there, so that makes them a little bit easier to collect, and that's pretty cool. So I might as well collect these eggs while I'm in here. Move, guys. Move. Thank you. Oh, and there's the one-eyed quail there. I don't know what we name her, but there she is, just one eye. She's getting along just fine. No problems. All right, well, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this format. If you have questions or topics that you want discussed on a future video, please leave them in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below if you like this content and you want to see more videos from me. Always looking for feedback from my viewers on what they would like to see, and I'll do my best to keep up with that. So, again, thanks for watching, and as always, God bless.